Jurassic World maintained extensive records for all its animals, containment schedules, behavioural reports, enclosure specifications, but for one specific animal, there's no paddock assignment, no tow infrastructure, no public containment data, almost as if it doesn't exist at all, but it does. You see, in the first file, we confirmed that other hybrids existed, classified, numbered, and hidden behind restricted access. And we know this because of Dr. Wu's laptop in his lab, and Dr. Wu's files numbered on his laptop seen in Camp Cretaceous. But this is only the tip of the iceberg. You see, these dinosaurs don't simply exist without space, planning, or oversight. And by the time Jurassic World had opened in 2005, internal priorities had already shifted, moved away from exhibition design and towards controlled experimentation. Rebirth shows us that by 2010 they already had a D-Rex, another island up and running, multiple hybrids. This is only a few years after Jurassic World had opened. You see, it's evident the shift had gone from public eye to how these dinosaurs could now be kept in secret, studied, directed, and ultimately repurposed. And that shift didn't happen publicly, oh no, it happened inside the restricted section. We know all about that from Jurassic World. But there's one specific hybrid that was never assigned a paddock. It remained behind restricted access, and no, I'm not talking about the Scorpius Rex. You see, paddocks exist to support visibility. They define the territory, allow predictable observation, and ultimately allow the public to view these animals from behind a safe environment. But for some projects, these constraints aren't useful. Prime example here was the Indominus Rex. They kept that under wraps for a long time. No public was introduced to that. And it's at this point where things start to get extremely interesting, because Dr. Wu's files become relevant. In Camp Cretaceous, his laptop briefly appears on screen. There are no images, no renderings, no promotional identifiers, only folders, numbered, sequential, and unlabeled. And that right there is a key, because public-facing animals are named. Look at the Indominus Rex, what a name. Animals on public display have names. Research subjects, however, are catalogued, numbered, and each folder we see represents a discrete project state. A single animal. How do we know this? Well, E750. That was the codename for Scorpius Rex. So these other 3 folders we see are codenames for 3 separate animals. This alone confirms that the hybrid development extended beyond one-off experimentation. We already know that because of Rebirth anyway. By 2010, they'd already experimented with the Mutodon, the D-Rex, God knows what other hybrids, the Scorpius Rex. So you can only imagine what they had in Jurassic World in 2015. But that's the key. We don't need to imagine. We have these folders. And this is where Vic Hoskins comes into play. You see, all this aligns perfectly on screen. Vic Hoskins' role at Jurassic World is explicit. You see, on multiple occasions, he frames dinosaurs as deployable assets. And he always questions the park's priorities. He criticizes the animal's wasted potential. This isn't us speculating. This is fact. And let's not forget here, Vic works extremely closely with Dr. Wu. This deal is so important to Wu that he's actually scared of losing it. He actually says, "Will our deal remain intact?" This tells me Wu was already working on several things under the control of InGen. Not Masrani Global, who owned the park, but InGen. In fact, he even says to the owner of Jurassic World, Masrani, that he's not at liberty to disclose the genetic makeup of the animals.
You know that I'm not at liberty to reveal the asset's genetic makeup. Modified animals are known to be unpredictable.
Implying there is someone else pulling the strings here. Someone else he's working for. Someone else he's creating other hybrids for. And a hybrid developed for potentially Vic Hoskins and his employer wouldn't require a paddock. Such a project would be housed with infrastructure already designed for restriction. And we already have that there, the restricted section. Service corridors, research zones, transit systems not mapped for guests. Where would this be, I wonder? Well, isn't it obvious? It wouldn't be surface level. It would be below the surface. And we know Jurassic World has these sub-levels. It's seen in Camp Cretaceous. And this is where things get extremely interesting, because this is what we're going to be exploring right now and what is down there. If space was limited below ground, it's highly unlikely they'd have a huge, massive titanosaur down there. No, they'd reduce the size. Just like Vic Hoskins says, Vic already knew they were making something a tenth of the size to the Indominus Rex. He hints at that in the lab. But not the Endoraptor, that obviously comes later from someone else. They were already making something like the Endoraptor. Obviously, they had a huge research project on the raptors themselves. Project Icarus was just that, the militarization of dinosaurs and how they could be used in military applications. But what about Spinosaurids and their characteristics? Wouldn't a Spinosaurid/raptor hybrid be much more efficient? I mean, not only could it be on land, running through the forests, it could also be amphibious by nature. It could go through rivers, oceans, and it's not bound to just land. That would be the best of both worlds, right? And within Wu's files, the configuration carries a working designation, a research label, W600, Spinoraptor. This designation appears alongside other numbered projects. You see, projects structured this way don't fail publicly, they don't escape. If research concludes, the asset is reclassified, transferred, archived, whatever you want to call it. There's no guest footage, no paddock damage, no incident narrative. The Spinoraptor was proof of concept, something which they were going to work towards rather than the Endoraptor. But obviously Jurassic World fell through. It collapsed after the Indominus Rex escape. And for those of you who don't know, the Spinoraptor is a genetically modified species of dinosaur. It was created by Dr. Henry Wu by combining the genomes of Spinosaurus and Velociraptor. But here's the interesting thing. They obviously have Velociraptor genome, but what about the Spinosaurus? Well, we see a Spinosaurus skeleton in Jurassic World itself. Many people speculated that this was the Spinosaurus from Jurassic Park 3. That's untrue. We see the Spinosaurus from Jurassic Park 3 in Camp Cretaceous Season 4, on a completely different island owned by Manticorp. But here's the interesting thing. Masrani Global acquired Isla Sorna in the early 2000s. It's highly likely they already had the DNA from that Spinosaurid anyway. Regardless whether it was poached later on or went to Jurassic World then poached from there to go to Manticorp Island is irrelevant. They would likely already have the genome to create the Spinoraptor. You see, this animal would have perfect military applications. Potentially the intelligence and speed of the Velociraptor, the aggression of the Spinosaurus, and let's not forget its swimming capabilities. We see how strong the Spinosaurus is in water in Jurassic Park 3. An animal designed to get in the trenches, use water pathways to get into complexes undetected. This would be the perfect animal. But alas, Jurassic World fell through. All the research data was lost, and Dr. Henry Wu had to start again. And the only hybrid sample he could get a hold of was the Indominus Rex. So he based his new hybrid, the Endoraptor, from that. But almost as if that's the downgrade, the Endoraptor wouldn't be able to go into water. But what could Dr. Wu actually do here? All his research was gone. He had no other option but to work on a successor to the Indominus Rex. And unfortunately, it wasn't the Spinoraptor. But that begs the question, if this hybrid existed and was developed without a paddock and tracked only through the restricted section itself, what happened after Jurassic World fell? What happened to these animals? Sure, we know the volcano erupts, but would that affect the underground facility? Well, the next file will address just that. What was left behind on that island and what doesn't come back. This has been Restricted File Episode 2. And if you haven't already, I'd check out the first one to see where it all starts. And I promise you, Episode 3 is going to blow your mind. Massive thanks to the restricted section personnel on screen now. DVM Wannabe 1018, Fallen Zuria, and our Jurassic CEOs Joseph Frost, Ghost, and Zarkadian. You guys keep the assets in containment. And if you were in the restricted section late at night and you came across the Spinoraptor, could your day get any worse? You bet Jurassic can. Catch you later.